Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Friday, June 21st, 2024. Time for another show. Hey, everybody join me in saying happy birthday, Mom. Hey, happy birthday, Mom. Yes, Mom X. I don't know. How do we refer to her on the air? Well, we'll find out. And we'll get a nice text that says, so everything was working 5 by 5, according to Justice, who was back at the desk at the Netroots Radio mothership. Some anomalies, I guess, in yesterday's live stream pointed out to me, but this was an amazing accomplishment, amazing engineering accomplishment for Justice to be away on travel for the bulk of the week, and everything pretty much worked like clockwork. We had a little, something, but we can have that on a day when he's at the desk. There's just things that pop and zing, and that's the way the internets really are. But anyway, I appreciate it very much for you putting in the extra effort to make sure that the show could go out. I really don't know why I'm so excited about the show going out every day, but it feels funny if you don't do your work, and I appreciate the fact that you were able to rig this thing up so that you could take care of biz, and so could we. So thanks very much to Justice, and everyone should stay tuned, of course, for the programming after today. I don't know if have you got a West Coast cookbook and speakeasy all prepared for Friday, or you just taking Friday off after a week of traveling up and down the length of the West Coast? I'm not sure, but I appreciate it nonetheless, and a good way, of course, of showing your appreciation. Don't forget, as frequently as we remind you that we survive on contributions and support from listeners, so does Netroots Radio. All of that equipment, it ain't free. So do stop by the Netroots Radio page and perhaps drop them a bit of coin to keep them up and running as well. So, all right, let's see. But save your money to some extent. Put some aside, because you need to be ready if something goes horribly wrong and Donald Trump were to seize power again. I've just been doing a little bit of scheming and scanning this morning, trying to read through what's news these days. And although the focus is narrow, immigration, which for Trump is always the focus, and isn't very narrow in his policy making, of course, to the extent that there's policy at all, it's quite worrisome. You're going to need to sock something away for bribery under the next Trump administration, should that somehow come to pass. It won't be because more people voted for him. Probably won't even be because more of the Electoral College voted for him. It'll just be because, I don't know, some papers somewhere said, I don't know where the papers came from, but they said he won, and I don't know, there's nothing we can do about it. We don't want to make Trump supporters mad. They might get angry and hold a demonstration somewhere. Anyway, what am I talking about? I don't know. Hell if I know what I'm talking about. I put something away this morning that will explain it. There was a little bit of social media chatter. Let's just dive right into this story. Social media chatter about this story. And let's see. On the one hand, we saw Radley Balco discussing it. And what else did I mark here? It's hard to tell without my actually opening these things up. Ah, yes, right. Okay. Totally different. Completely ridiculous, unmooring from the rule of law and Constitution and everything else that goes along with it. But this one, first, I happened to see Radley Balco passing this story around. It's a Washington Post story, and the title is Trump Pledges Green Cards for College Grads, Reviving a Hillary Clinton Idea. And it's interesting, just the framing right off the bat. Well, this is interesting. So Trump is actually saying there are people who he would allow to immigrate and to be given green cards. And who are they and why? And are we sure that, who are you and what have you done with Donald Trump? Or rather, the question that most people were asking, what have you done with Stephen Miller? Because Stephen Miller doesn't actually want to pave a path to citizenship for anybody, no matter who they are. If they're not already here, And even if they are, if they're brown, he'd like to round them up and send them out of the country. So what are we talking about? And has this been vetted with Stephen Miller? I actually saw most people discussing this. Has he checked with Miller on this? Is Miller going to allow this? It's interesting to think about what that means, just in general. Like for big, strong, very strongly big leader Donald Trump to have so many people wondering, first off, well, is Stephen Miller, the weird, bald simp, going, or Gimp, actually, I keep him in, I don't know. Is he going to allow this? And I mean, he's an influential voice, certainly, and to the extent that there's anything that even looks like policy, it very often comes out of his shop, but I don't know. It's very difficult to understand or to know for sure what the dynamic is between the two of them. However, there were others who read all the way through the article and said, no, this sounds more like Miller. Here, Balco's comment about it, just to set the scene, how this came to my attention. But Balco's own comment about it, see if we can engineer opening it up here. Interesting. Wonder if this is Trump rewarding his big-name tech supporters. It's certainly not, as he observes right away, certainly not a Miller policy. Also, it's unfortunate. This is a different observation. But we'll stop and talk about this one. I guess the idea of giving away, I don't know, allowing people who have actually, invested the tremendous amount of time and effort to come to the United States to study, and along the way, in order to study and graduate successfully, you have to do a certain amount of assimilation into the system. But I guess here the idea is supposed to be, well, if you've not only invested heavily, i.e. paid lots of tuition, in many cases, to American institutions, and, more or less dedicated yourself to acquiring the sorts of skills that would get you a good paying job here in the United States. That's the sort of person we'd be, in general, that they're trying to make you think they would be happy to admit to the United States. Now, if you're brown and you have those skills, I don't know, we'll see. But if you're white and you have those skills, we can let you stay. Now, how would you apply those rules across the board? And the answer, this is where eventually we get with this analysis, is, well, they wouldn't be applied across the board. Who cares? They would be applied as we see fit. And I will just say that what this led me to was, I think, to the extent that we spend any time saying, well, how would a rule like what he proposes work? We come up with counterexamples, et cetera, and we all sort of chuckle and roll our eyes and say, well, obviously it would just be, well, if you're white, you get it, and if you're brown, you don't. But why wouldn't that be exactly how it comes out? It's not a joke. In a regime where it's frequently mentioned that the putative commander-in-chief, the president of the United States, would simply pardon all loyalists of all crimes, why wouldn't it be exactly that? We worry about things like the rule of law and even-handed application of the rule of law. And why would you think we would adhere to that? We just would not. Just imagine things that way, and then things, I think, become a little clearer. So, yeah, interesting. Wonder if this is Trump rewarding his big-name tech supporters. Remember, of course, that it wasn't so long ago that he spoke to a group of big-name tech supporters and said, essentially, if you give me $1 billion, I'll give you the policies you want. I don't know if they've come through with the $1 billion, but maybe this is him teasing. Balco's wondering if this is him teasing policy they want, i.e., I'm just thinking to like tech-oriented visas, right? What are they, the H-1B visas, or am I thinking of Greg and his various viruses? But visas for special skills and talents, and it's particularly used by the tech companies to bring people in from overseas who either have those skills or are coming to the United States to acquire those skills through education. And, I'm having a hard time filling these jobs here in the United States. They bring these special talents. They're very valuable. We make money out of them. And essentially, the question is, will you kick some of that money that you make back to Trump? And if so, then he'll give you the mechanism by which you can continue to generate that money, these visas. And that's probably exactly how you should be thinking of this stuff. He interestingly goes on, well, maybe at this point we should read the article and then we can double back and make his second point, which is equally interesting, but good foreshadowing if you happen to already see it. Here's the piece he's talking about, though. Trump pledges green cards for college grads, reviving a Hillary Clinton idea. Interesting. The subheader says, you'd turn colleges into visa mills. One advocate of restricting immigration said. So you see what's going on here. The counterpoint is advocates of restricting immigration. Now, who do you know that's giant, flabby, orange, and is an advocate of restricting immigration? And the answer, of course, is Donald Trump, the candidate of the Republican Party, the candidate who proposes green cards, or rather pledges green cards for college grads. So Balco's second point, very interesting here. It's also unfortunate that the Post goes to an anti-immigration group for a quote here, presenting the issue as Trump on one side and immigration opponents on the other. There you have it. Both sides, everybody. On the one hand, you got Trump, who opposes immigration, but on the other, someone who represents a group that opposes immigration. Both sides of this issue, but is this an issue or is this just a bribery scheme? All right. Well, here's the Trump's why not? The Post's description of it. We're reading Isaac Arnsdorf here again in the Washington Post. Presumptive Republican nominee. That's interesting to throw in there. I mean, it's true, but it's a good reminder. Presumptive Republican nominee Donald Trump said foreign-born college graduates should automatically be authorized to stay and work in the United States. Now, interesting proposal. I also don't think that's the way it would actually work in practice, and you shouldn't put too much faith into automatically be authorized. Because if it's truly automatic, then there's no way to operate this for cash. And this is Donald Trump we're talking about. I think you should imagine it differently. But he says, I mean, this is what you say in order to get away with it ahead of time, that you will be automatically authorized to stay and work in the United States, a position once championed by former rival Hillary Clinton, and at odds with his usually restrictive stance on immigration. And another thing you should imagine this in the background happening is his entire campaign staff saying, what? No, it's just the old man being the old man. He's going to say a thing. He thinks it's going to work for this audience, and people will press him on it later, and he'll say, no, or yes, 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 and then just do no later. Or we can make him do no later. I don't know where this came from. He has these ideas that he has political instincts. He just blurts these things out. What I wanted to do, and what I will do, is you graduate from a college. I think you should get automatically, as part of your diploma, a green card to be able to stay in this country. Trump said in an interview on a podcast titled All In, released today. Whose podcast is this? I don't know. Maybe that would help explain it. A green card is the colloquial term for legal permanent residency, in case you didn't know. I mean, I think you know, but Trump went on to specify that he would apply the policy to anyone attending a 2 or 4 year college. 2 week, even a 2-week college, it would be okay. In certain circumstances, it would probably be okay. And I bet that's true. The proposal would be a major departure from Trump's usual stance on immigration issues and current policy. Presently, those on foreign student visas have the option to stay for 1 to 3 years, depending on their major, through a program called Optional Practical Training. Opt. So you get to opt in. More than 340,000 people held work authorizations through the program in 2023, according to the Congressional Research Service. Trump previously expressed support in 2015 for green cards for college graduates, but the idea was more widely associated with Hillary Clinton, his Democratic opponent, whose campaign website said she would, quote, staple a green card to master's and doctoral diplomas in science, technology, engineering, and math. I mean, you see what the policy is all about, right? Where we want to strengthen our STEM capabilities in the country, and if you get a advanced degree in one of those things, the staple thing, well, okay. And, of course she wouldn't, It wouldn't be stapled and then, see, she's a liar. There's no staple here. All right. But it would, and it's a metaphor for it becoming automatic as Trump now advocates. Now, of course, what happened? Hillary Clinton proposed it and Republicans said, well, then it's a bad idea. The proposal was attacked by immigration hardliners in Trump's camp, including far-right website Breitbart and then Senator Jeff Sessions, who became Trump's attorney general. The staple green card idea is to take the existing system and put it on steroids. Jeremy Beck, president of Numbers USA, a group that advocates for restricting immigration, fewer numbers, I guess, in the USA, said on Thursday, you'd turn colleges into visa mills, he said, driving up tuition costs and increasing competition for admission and jobs with domestic students. I'm not sure why it drives up tuition costs, but, you know, that sounds scary. So it does that and also takes away, your Lucky Charms at breakfast. So you got to be against it. Trump campaign spokeswoman, here's where it starts to sound more Trumpy in the policy end, right? Oh, what's this whole thing about Trump? He's betraying us. What? How dare he? I thought he was for restricting immigration. Well, don't worry, because Trump campaign spokeswoman Caroline Leavitt clarified Trump's comments, which doesn't count because unless the candidate says it. Oops, oh, I'm sorry. You say this one. John Barron. Oh, okay. Unless the candidate says it, it's not official. But Caroline Leavitt says Trump's comments should be understood by saying that graduates would be screened, you see, just to make sure. And there are people who would scream this immediately. Well, what if they're communists? Would we give them an automatic green card? No, not automatic, because we will be screening for communists, but also radical Islamists, Hamas supporters, America haters, and public charges before receiving green cards, i.e., if they decided that you were any of these things, they would just simply say, well, it's not so automatic for you, I guess. I guess we care a lot more about these green cards than, I don't know. And I mean, again, don't waste any time saying, well, how will they determine if you're an America hater? That's such a vague term. How will they decide if you're a radical Islamist? They could use this against anybody. Yes, that's right. Well, what if I'm not brown? Well, they can call you an America hater. Well, what if I wrap myself in the flag? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Then you're a public charge. No, what if I show that No. Show who? Show who? No. Don't analyze it as policy. This is just how the money-making machine will work. Now, there's more description, on the official article. He believes, I guess the Caroline Leavitt continues, only after such vetting has taken place, that's the choke point where they take your money, only after such vetting has taken place, we ought to keep the most skilled graduates who can make significant contributions to America. This would only apply to the most thoroughly vetted college graduates who would never undercut American wages or workers. How do you know? Don't. We don't know. This is it. So what this happened, this quickly evolves into for radio, the Department of, what do we think of this guy? Has he paid us? Or if you, are a Goodfellas watcher, it's the Department of F you, pay me. How does this not become something like this? Think about this in the context of Schedule F, Project 2025, and it's Schedule F, where every federal employee is an at-will employee at the will of the president and can be, even at the lowest level, can be named by the president, fired by the president, and of course, importantly, for a scheme like this, if you want, pardoned by the president. So every job, why would anybody sign on for a disastrous Trump administration? And the answer is it's a license to print money eventually. You're working in the Department of F you, pay me, and that's every department. And along comes the college graduate who has been working in STEM and et cetera, and wants the so-called automatic green card that comes with the policy you announced. It was in the paper and everything. Well, there are qualifications to that. For instance, maybe you're a communist, radical Islamist, Hamas supporter, America hater, or public charge, right? We have to check you to see whether or not that's the case. And then it's my favorite obscure scene from, what is it, like Beverly Hills Cop 2, 3, 10, I don't even know. I forget. How many of those did they even make? Gilbert Gottfried, right, trying to work out a bribe with Eddie Murphy's character. Is there something that I have in this hand that if I was to put it in your hand would make this problem go away? Whatever it was. Something like that. And everybody will just be asked that. You are a foreign student from, well, let's say someplace that might very easily be viewed as a breeding ground for communists, radical Islamists, Hamas supporters, America haters, and public charges. Any one of these will do. And, you're not very famous as a communist, radical Islamist, Hamas supporter, America hater, or public charge. So you might be able to get away with something like this when they say, is there something, this is more aggressive, they'll solicit the bribe. Is there something in your hand that if it was in my hand, I would say, what is this? What is this thing, this other thing in my hand, which is the rubber stamp where I say no to your immigration visa application? Is there something, what if you handed me something that caused me to drop this stamp and I couldn't find it and you were allowed into the country? If you're not a particularly famous Islamist, Hamas supporter, or America hater, it might just work. And then, of course, if you are, in fact, a famous one, then the rate just went up. Or even if you're not and have nothing to do with it, give me whatever it is, $10,000, and I'll stamp it and you'll get the green card. But that's bribery. That's outrageous. Yeah, it is outrageous. And supposing I got this job because I gave $1 million to the Trump campaign, am I going to be charged in federal court? Well, I might be charged. Is the charge going to stick, or am I going to get a pardon? Well, on the one hand, you might think, well, he gave Trump $1 million. He would get a pardon. But of course, that's just, remember that everything Trump touches dies, because this is just an opportunity for the Trump administration to then remind you, what would really help in a situation like this? $2 million. You got to pay again. You paid and you got the job, which was a license to print money. Then you got caught printing money. Now you got to pay for the pardon to get out. But, maybe yes, maybe no. Sometimes he'll do it for free if he knows you and likes you. Sometimes he'll charge you more, right? Why shouldn't you imagine that every single federal policy under a second Trump quote-unquote administration will work exactly like this? Tell me what the logical outcome of him pardoning people left and right, getting ready to pardon himself, being a convicted criminal on the way in. You knew I was a convicted criminal when you elected me. You didn't think I was going to do some sort of criminal scheme when I got there. What were you thinking? And, pardoning himself and doing so and coming into office saying, I want the ability to hire and fire directly from the office of the president at anyone's recommendation. Anyway, I'm not going to spend time scrutinizing anybody. That's for the Department of FU Pay Me, who all paid me to get jobs at the Department of FU Pay Me and have to continue paying me or they lose those jobs and get arrested. That's what a lawless administration looks like. It's a little bit like, I don't know, let's say, I believe this is the sort of thing that could happen maybe in a country formerly under some previous system of government, perhaps a communist country, some sort of union of Soviets, or at least their socialist republics, let's say. Should that collapse and the whole thing then later be run by kleptocratic mobsters, this is the sort of thing that could happen. But luckily we haven't, witnessed that happening yet. So, it's just speculation at this point. Anyway, as difficult as it is to believe and as scary as it is, it seems to be taking shape, and you can understand and believe the way Trump is with immigrants that he would do this with the immigration policy. But, why wouldn't that also be part of the, the energy policy? You want the rights to drill for oil? You want the rights to sell your oil? You want the rights to just not be investigated by my Department of Justice? Anything could be turned into this kind of bribery. And that's why people want to work in a Trump administration, because they think they can make a fortune out of it. And if they get in legal trouble, they'll be pardoned, which is kind of exactly how the oligarchy of Putin's Russia works. So, well, that's crazy. Nothing could ever work like that in a major country. Oh, well, it's working that way right now. And if it all goes to hell here, you can just run to that other country. And they'll just totally let you into the system and not make you fall out of a window in Kiev. So anyway, there's more to this article. But we left off with the statement of Caroline Leavitt just saying, well, somebody will take care of the vetting in all of this. And if you pass the vetting, whether that involves a bribe or not, then maybe you get that card. It's not automatic after all. So to the extent that you thought that was very un-Trump-like, the Trump team just walked it back. Immigration is one of the dominant issues of the Trump campaign. He often accuses people of abusing visa programs, so he figures he would do it too, and frequently uses vilifying and dehumanizing language to describe unauthorized immigrants, describing them categorically as dangerous criminals, terrorists, diseased, and mentally ill. He has proposed deploying the military to carry out a mass deportation operation, including the use of large-scale roundups and detention camps. But if you don't think he's got enough people to do that, he could just let vigilantes do it, and if they're caught, then pardon them too. Or, not even bother deputizing people. Just if you feel like the person next to you is too brown, you do what you have to do. And, if you're a loyal, patriotic American, no harm will come to you. Okay. So it should work just beautifully. Elsewhere in the wide-ranging interview, Trump returned to exaggerated portrayals of crime in U.S. cities, often referencing those with large minority populations. There is more to the article, and we'll continue with it. It's very interesting, and I feel sort of bad for the author here, who clearly went out of his way to include this kind of material describing Trump so that the article would look even-handed, but then Radley Balco points out correctly, weird both-sidesing, dude.
Sup fam, it's your boy Darwin, aka Darwin_Darko, aka the most reasonable man in America, aka KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. As I'm sifting through things here, hold on a second. I feel like I got to scroll back. I want to find something that I can pop out from Blue Sky and possibly share with you later, because there's more show to do here. All right, where were we with this article? Yes, we wanted to read all the way through this. Why did I scroll to the top? Oh, yes, right, because I felt bad for Isaac Arnsdorf, who I think had done an admirable job in including material in here describing just how bad Donald Trump actually is on most of these issues, and what a jackass he is generally, and yet ends up getting criticized. But, valid point that Balco has here, that in an effort to balance a story, this is a great example of, I don't even know whether this was a conscious effort from Trump to manipulate the press, because I just don't think he makes conscious efforts. I don't think he makes efforts. So conscious efforts is doubly unlikely. But it comes out looking that way, a conscious effort at manipulating the press into making his side look reasonable. And I think that there's some strategy in this. Like, I'll offer a path through to a green card to certain types. And this sort of looks like I have a policy that's aimed at, stimulating business in this country or something. And Balco makes a good guess there that this might be a sop to big tech, who, he's hoping will still pass him $1 billion to run his campaign with, / steal, pocket, launder to his own use, whatever. And that this is the reward for it, even though it's not at all logical or consistent with his other policies. But again, don't worry about logic or consistency. That's not actually going to be a part of how Trump governs. And to the extent that you're looking for, well, how would this come out? The answer is it wouldn't. It just would happen. Anyway, let's see. Where do we leave off with reading this? Right. Elsewhere in the wide-ranging interview, Trump returned to exaggerating portrayals of crime in U.S. cities, often referencing those with large minority populations. Which minorities? Well, let's see. Let's start with Oakland, California. Trump said, nobody lives there except criminals. I mean, what are you going to do with this, right? He just says anything. Violent crime has fallen 33% compared with the same period in 2023 in the city of 430,000 people, with a 17% decrease in homicides and a 21% decrease in assaults with firearms. I read it that way, not because that isn't an amazing accomplishment. It is. But that's one of those real-world accomplishments that don't matter when you're dealing with a fantasy player like this guy. I don't know if I ever completed the thought here. The author here, having included all of this extra information, still is rightly, it's pointed out by Radley Balco, that in an effort to fulfill the journalistic mission and have a comment from somebody from the other side, he ends up portraying the immigration policy issue as, well, on the one side you have Donald Trump, whereas, and in this case, he's saying that there are certain circumstances under which he would allow immigrants into the country. Okay, that is unusual for him, and it may or may not be a sop to big tech. It may or may not be him saying, look, see, I'm reasonable. Some people I would let in. I'm not shutting off all immigration. Like he has no intention ever, throughout all of this, the years he's spent in and around power, he's never had he's never shown any indication he would shut off the pipeline for foreign employees at Pervalago. I mean, he staffs the whole place every summer with immigrants. That's, sure, it's absolutely hypocritical. What are you going to do about it? Nothing. It's only the 50 millionth most egregious outrage he commits. So focus on other things. But yeah, so as a result, you end up now saying, well, both sides, I'll cover them both. Trump says maybe kind of, sort of, if you pay him enough money, he'll let a few people into the country, but also maybe not. We find that out later. So for an opposing view, we talk to an opponent of immigration. But Trump's an opponent of immigration. So now I've covered both sides of this issue. I've asked both an opponent of immigration and an opponent of immigration how they feel about immigration. And it's too bad, because he did some good work in including important context about Trump. But, nobody's perfect. What can I tell you? It's a valid observation. And, it's embarrassing. Don't feel bad about it. Just work on it in the next article or publish a follow-up. Anyway, right. So then I ran through the other information that he included, because it ends up being, relatively ineffectual. It's there. We all see it. But again, to the extent that you're going to focus on, well, he says crime is out of control. But I have news for you. The fact is that violent crime has fallen 33% this year compared with the same period in 2023, and with a 17% decrease in homicides and a 21% decrease in assaults with firearms. Now, I have read that twice to you. What was the decrease in homicides? What percentage was it in Oakland, California? Anybody? If you have a good memory or you're listening closely, you can cite it back to me. It's 17%. For most people like me, that number came and went. I don't know if it's not 20, 25. It's not round. There's no chance of my remembering it. Maybe if it's more specific like that. Some people are able to remember it because it was so specific. 17% decrease. All right, but can you remember the percent decrease in assaults with firearms? No, probably not. You can't. It was 21%. Violent crime overall decrease is sort of roundish. It's 1/3, 33%. 1/3. I might be able to remember that. But even if you do, on the one hand, there's crime rampant all over this country. The whole city of Oakland is filled with criminals. Nobody lives there anymore. Just criminals. Are you kidding? There's been, not only is that not true and highly offensive, but even as crime goes, 1/3 was, Now, I guess he'd answer you with, you tell me whether a victim of violent crime, it doesn't say there's zero violent crime in Oakland. You tell me whether a victim of violent crime in Oakland cares that 1/3 fewer people got victimized by violent crime. You don't care. You're victimized once. That's all there is to it. And kind of true. But it doesn't matter. Well, that's a 33% drop in violent crime. Congratulations. That is, in the real world, fantastic. But you are campaigning against the guy who just said, every single person who lives in Oakland, there's only criminals there. You should just arrest Oakland. And he feels free to say that. And nobody just puts a net over him and takes him to the psycho ward. All right, 17%. 17%, that's very interesting. Except it's not true. It's also not true. Not true. That's the deep state saying that everybody's a criminal. All right. But my statistics say this. Yeah, well, in the new administration, you're under arrest. Unless you pay me, in which case you're pardoned. You're beautiful. You're a very lovely human being, and I wish you well. Trump said he would achieve better education results. Why is that? How would he do it? By cutting federal funding in half. Yeah. We're going to give them approximately half the number of dollars, and they're going to have so much money that like they've never had before because they can spend a fraction of what we're spending right now and have much better school system. He said that there's the product of the school system for you. Excuse me, what? Well, we're going to cut their money in half. And as a result, they're going to have more money than they ever had before. Well, no, they're going to have half the money they had before. Maybe yes, maybe no. Some people say yes, some people say no. I say no, or unless I had framed that backwards. Maybe I say yes. I'm not even sure. I'm going to give you 1/2 the answers that I used to give you, and you're going to have more information than you ever had in your life. I'm going to give them approximately half the number of dollars, and they're, no joke, I'll just read it straight. We're going to give them approximately half the number of dollars, and they're going to have so much money that like they've never had before, because they can spend a fraction of what we're spending right now and have much better school systems. Now that sounds like an accusation of waste, fraud, and abuse, of course, but leave that part out. We don't even care. The point is, Republicans have conditioned everybody to the idea of, well, we'll cut spending, but that's okay because so much of it is waste. What we'll teach them to do then is waste $0. If 50% of what we give them is waste and we cut 50% and say, just get rid of waste, then there's no difference. Okay, but how do you get rid of waste? I don't know, but I do give them the instruction that they should. If they can't, they're incompetent and I want to be able to fire them. Schedule F, you see. Trump has previously proposed abolishing the U.S. Department of Education. That would be 2/2 less money than they get now. Abolishing the U.S. Department of Education without specifying, of course, what would happen to its discretionary budget of more than $78 billion. But I have a few ideas what I might like to do with $78 billion. Golden toilets comes to mind. That's a possibility. Most of which, though, that $78 billion funds grants for local agencies to serve disadvantaged or disabled students. Very disgusting people. No one likes to have their picture made with one of these people who has no legs or is in a wheelchair or maybe is, you can't use this word for him anymore, but not pretty smart. You know what I'm saying? I mean, he could say that and it would be fine. It would be fine. It'd be an item in the paper and people would go, that's outrageous. Next day, he's still the Republican nominee. But okay, $78 billion, most of which funds grants for local agencies to serve disadvantaged or disabled students who he finds disgusting, on financial aid or loan subsidies for college students who he hates also, and why don't you pay me money if you want to stay in college? On Russia's invasion of Ukraine, sure, why don't we ask him this question? He only got impeached over his handling of this the first time. But let's ask him a question because it's a legitimate policy issue and he's a legitimate candidate. Trump blamed U.S. allies in NATO for causing the conflict. Your problem is you defended yourself against invasion. That's the issue. For 20 years, I heard that NATO, if Ukraine goes into NATO, it's a real problem for Russia, he said. I think that's really why this war started, except, of course, Ukraine did not go into NATO. They were interested because they were constantly being threatened by Russia, but they didn't go in. But, whatever. This is not the author of this piece. Remember, this is in the podcast interview. So to the extent that the questions are dumb and there's no follow-up, you got to blame the podcaster for this one. When one of the podcast hosts told Trump that French President Emmanuel Macron had discussed sending troops to Ukraine, Trump responded with apparent sarcasm, I wish them a lot of luck. Macron has held open the possibility of sending NATO troops to Ukraine, but said the current situation doesn't require it. He has floated sending military trainers to Western Ukraine away from combat. I don't know. Is that a helpful inclusion in the article? I don't know, but it probably happened on the podcast. So Isaac Arnsdorf gives us a thorough rundown anyway, I assume, of what happened. Maybe he left 50% of the interview out. I really don't know. But that was enough to fill a segment and a half. But yes, you should absolutely consider a realistic possibility that there's no policy of any kind anywhere, to the extent that if you think it can't happen because, no, the volume of work that the federal government handles is just too large, you can't, in fact, just hold up every case and decide on a case-by-case basis how much money you want to demand as a bribe, or check whether or not they're a Trump loyalist or whatever before you approve these things. Remember also that they have no particular interest in actually having a functioning federal government, except to the extent that it gives them the chance to steal money. So I suppose, they could always just say, keep an eye out for yourself for opportunities to hold people up. Certainly if there are famous opponents of the administration, you can hold them up. People that you think are wealthy enough to pay a bribe, you can hold them up. But if your department doesn't actually take care of business and approve the applications of everybody who's looking for a federally subsidized home loan or whatever, what do I care? Screw that. I mean, I'm the president who told people to drink bleach for COVID. So do I care if the policy is correct? I mean, faced with a global pandemic that was killing people left and right, even then I still didn't, care to actually let science operate or let the professionals do their jobs. So do you think it will disturb me if people don't get their federally subsidized home loans, or they don't get their SNAP benefits, or they don't get the education grant, or name the department, or for that matter, their federal farmer subsidies? Well, there we might say, yeah, let some of those go, because the farmers are for Trump. And if you make a mistake and some money goes to a Trump opponent, if you find out about it, we'll claw it back. Audit them and then take the money back through taxes. Sure, why not? But isn't that illegal? Yeah, it is, right. Again, don't worry about it. We'll just pardon you if we feel like it later on. But right now, wink, wink, we definitely promise to pardon you. And good luck holding us to it. Maybe we'll honor our promises to you. Maybe not. Not really sure. We'll see how I'm feeling later on. Okay. So I guess maybe in the same vein, I did open this up and put something away from Trump deck here. Why am I calling it? I think I did this yesterday too. Blue Sky's not tweet deck, but whatever. And now it's Trump deck because all the things open on it are about Trump. What's the second item? Gonna have to open it up from Pocket once again. But this one very interesting too. Yeah, here we go. Mitchell Epner on Blue Sky observed this, and interesting too. This is something that Greg commented on the other day and suggested what might actually be happening here. And Mitchell has the same idea. This from a New York Times article. Again, framing things as, kind of normal. Who might Donald Trump pick for vice president? It's an interesting question in a traditional sense. Usually, under most circumstances, we have two relatively normal candidates for president from the major parties, and it's of interest who the vice president is going to be because they wield a certain amount of power and, of course, stand to inherit the office should something happen to the president. But in the Trump world, of course, we gave him one shot at it. He picked Mike Pence, and then by the end of that one term, he was ready to hang Mike Pence. So I don't know whether it makes any difference who Trump might pick for vice president, but traditionally it's a big question. So it looks newsy for us to ponder the question. And so they do it. It's Michael C. Bender, so you don't make any mistakes, and Rebecca Lieberman doing the traditional thing which newspapers do when they have normal candidates, even though we don't have a normal candidate. Donald J. Trump will reveal his running mate soon. He has suggested that he will unveil the pick at the Republican National Convention, which is, it's interesting. He has suggested that he will do this. Well, that's sort of where they do this kind of thing. Actually, at the convention, it's not that unusual. But of course, for him, it's going to be reality television style. He may not actually do it by presenting a rose, but essentially his idea of, the entertainment value of the pick will probably compel him to do something like this. And sometimes it's announced ahead of time when, makes a certain amount of sense, I guess. But I don't know. My recollection, for instance, of the announcement of Sarah Palin, I think that was convention time that they made that announcement, or thereabouts anyway. At any rate, Donald J. Trump will reveal his running mate soon. He's suggested he'll do it at the convention. That means television ratings to him in his mind, which starts July 15th in Milwaukee. But remember, Milwaukee is a hellhole, and he doesn't want to go there, and he's going to be staying in Chicago during the convention, not Milwaukee. Why? One, because Milwaukee is ridden with crime and is a hellhole, which is certainly something he doesn't say about Chicago somehow. But he owns a hotel in Chicago, so if he stays there, all of the entourage has to pay him to stay with him. So that's the scheme. Anyway, I like this one. So he's going to unveil the pick at the convention, but it's possible an announcement comes sooner. Soon, 2 weeks, possibly sooner. Mar-a-Lago courtiers generally agree that any resume for the number 2 spot, and they're both number 2s really, on the ticket must include some Trump-specific requirements that defy demographics or electoral upside. Absolute loyalty to the Trump brand. That's going to be a must. A willingness to filter every decision and public comment through a subservient lens. And the know it when you see it central casting look that the former president prizes. Here is a look at some potential choices. The leading contenders. It's a whole graphic presentation and everything. Trump is unpredictable, but he appears to have a current top tier. And yeah, I mean, he does. And yet, here's the top tier. Shall I give you the names? I mean, the top of the top tier is J.D. Vance and Doug Burgum, which it couldn't be two more polar opposites. And a lot of speculation in the recent days. Well, J.D. Vance, he's a loudmouth and a hatchet man, but that's the problem with him, too, is he thinks of himself as a leading figure, and he won't be subservient enough to Trump. I think he can find it within himself to be subservient enough for the time being. But yeah, Trump doesn't want anybody. It is often theorized that Trump doesn't want a replacement. Anyway, each one of them gets a little box here, and we get the pros and the cons. And I don't know, it'd probably take too long to read all the way through the pros and cons of them. J.D. Vance, I'll give you an example. He's a well-known possibility. So it says here, J.D. Vance, the best-selling author, that's true, and former venture capitalist, which is also bad, is now a senator from Ohio, thanks largely to a Trump endorsement. And so I guess Trump thinks he owes me, he'll be a good lapdog, etc. The pros, he and Trump resolved their differences and have become particularly close. Again, amazing. Lindsey Graham-like in that sense. He was a anti-Trump big mouth at first, and now he's become the biggest pro-Trump big mouth. Vance is one of Trump's most vigorous defenders, which sets him apart in a Senate populated with skeptics of the former president. I don't think that's really how the Senate is populated, but okay. Both are immigration hardliners who will also share similar views on trade. Now the cons, he's much younger than Trump, but he wouldn't add any gender or ethnic diversity to the ticket, which is actually anathema to them anyway. Ohio is no longer a presidential battleground. That's for people who think they are going to depend on the number of votes that they get or that the Electoral College is a real thing. And then Vance is fiercely anti-abortion, which could add to the party's difficulties on that issue, but I don't think Trump understands that or thinks about that. So it doesn't matter either. How will you deal with the fact that so many people are very worried about how the Republican Party will handle abortion? I will tell them that we will not be doing that we will have all sorts of exceptions and good things, and you could even pay to have your abortion. We'll announce that later, perhaps 2 weeks. But he'll just say, no, we're going to be very moderate on abortion. It doesn't matter. He can fix that by just saying, we're going to be moderate on abortion. Headline, Trump says he's going to be moderate on abortion. So there you go. Well, okay, so there's a box like that for everybody. And I mean, maybe for some of the lesser known people, we might have to say, well, who is this and what are the pros and cons? Doug Burgum gets the next spot here, and he's North Dakota's governor, and he came up short in the 2024 presidential race. Do you even remember that he ran for president? But he did put himself in the mix for the party's number 2 slot. Like, wow, that was savvy of you to notice. Isn't that kind of what happens to everybody who runs for president and comes up short? They are sure there are pros for this guy. And here they are. I don't know. Trump loves surrounding himself with status and wealth. Okay. And Burgum checks that box, does he? I guess so. Did I know that? No, I didn't. He checks that box after selling his software company to Microsoft for more than $1 billion in 2001. Trump praised his business acumen in a North Dakota radio interview in December. That's some thin gruel. Burgum showed little interest in attacking Trump during his primary race. So there's that. There's more verbiage about that, but that's the gist of it. And his performance at the first primary debate will be remembered for his repeatedly pleading with moderators for time to talk about energy issues in North Dakota. There is no risk that he would steal the spotlight for Trump. That's the pro we were looking for. Cons, everything. Who the F is this guy? But formally the cons are Burgum's relative obscurity cuts both ways. Unlike Mike Pence, who brought credibility with evangelical voters, there's no natural constituency for Burgum. So he only got an unnatural one. And he's never been tested on a national stage. Okay, true. Next up, Marco Rubio. I think you all know enough about Marco Rubio. Beyond him, Tim Scott. Same thing. You've heard the name. Let me just, in the interest of time, run through people who you are likely to have heard of. Tom Cotton comes next. Then Bill Hagerty. Is it Hagerty? Hagerty? I don't even know. So him we're going to have to read something about. He's the senator from Tennessee. There's only 2 senators from Tennessee. But, he's the one we don't know about or even how to pronounce his name. He's a senator from Tennessee who used to run a private equity firm. Ooh, more diversity. And he is making a late push for consideration. Sure, why not? The pros, this is hilarious. I mean, sad? Hilarious? I don't know. Remember what article we're reading before I read this to you. We're reading about contenders for the vice presidency of the United States and why a major party nominee might consider them to be next in line to the presidency of the United States of America, leader of the free world, first in line for it. What is his biggest pro? I assume it's his biggest pro because it's listed first. Dark-haired and blue-eyed. He has the type of look that Trump likes and strong ties to the former president. What kind of ties? Strong ones. Very strong ties. This is it. He could be vice president. Why? Well, he's got dark hair and blue eyes. He looks like he's from Central Casting. Oh, all the things about him. He has other pros. He was the Tennessee finance chairman for the Trump campaign in 2016. Then helped with by the way, could you possibly have failed as Trump finance chairman for Tennessee in 2016? Nope. If you had stolen all the money, it would still be a gold star on your resume. There's no way that he was losing Tennessee, and they didn't need to spend any money to do it. But okay. He did that. Then he helped with the White House transition by overseeing presidential appointments, including, what do you know, his own as ambassador to Japan. So he Dick Cheney'd his way into the federal government. And then Trump likes sports team owners. And Haggerty, is he one? Sort of. He helped bring a Major League Soccer team to Nashville. You know, the Nashville who? Nah, I don't know. I'm not a soccer fan, so it's a bad test. But does anybody? What's the name of the Nashville soccer team in Major League Soccer? I don't know. I'm gonna find out. Oops, I got the. Hey, Lodi, no, it's time for us to take a break here. What's it? The MSL, Nashville Soccer MSL, the Nashville. I don't know. Nashville SC. Is that, are you telling me that, is that the Nashville Soccer Club or something? What does SC stand for? I'm not enough of a soccer fan to know. But there you go. That's like the Washington football team, I guess. So they don't even have a name. This is how popular Major League Soccer is in Nashville. I don't know. Maybe they're selling tickets. There's kids there. They love soccer these days. So there you go. He loves Major League sports team owners. Is he one? Not really. Did he help bring one in? I guess so. Sort of, kind of, maybe. Well, as it turns out, his family is a minority owner in the team. And as you know, Trump hates minorities. So I guess he's out. Oh, no, that kind of minority. I see what you mean. Got it. Less than 50%. All right, welcome back now, everybody, to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I know all your confidence in humanity is being destroyed by today's show. We were in the middle of telling you why Bill Haggerty is supposedly a consideration for vice president, and we were all astonished to find out, one, there is a Bill Haggerty, and two, he's a senator from Tennessee. But what you probably didn't know about him was that he is dark-haired and blue-eyed, and that is a qualification for vice president in the next Donald Trump administration. Apparently, it says he has the type of look that Trump likes. In fact, if that were the case, then I could pretty much guarantee you that the next president of the United States is going to be a blonde with big boobs. But it's probably not. Because, of course, when he says that the kind of look Trump likes, not for myself, but for the country, they want to know that the country will be incapable, I guess, hair and eyes, not hands. We don't talk about hands very much in this administration. I don't know. If it comes down to it, we need a guy with dark hair. Do I have dark hair? No, I don't, but I'm very special. I don't know what that even is supposed to mean. I don't think he looks anything like what Trump thinks is a central casting figure, but I guess they really had nothing else to say about the guy. The three pros on this guy is he's got dark hair. He was finance chairman for the Trump campaign for Tennessee in 2016, which he finagled into a job at the transition team, which he finagled into being named U.S. ambassador to Japan. And then his family is a minority owner of the Nashville Major League Soccer team. This is a huge stretch. Every single one of the pros is like, I don't know, Trump likes sports and hair. So, there's no pros here. What's the cons? Everything. He owns a soccer team, and I hate soccer. That's a stupid sport. The cons are he was an economic advisor to former President George W. Bush. That is a pro. But for Trump, it's a con. But so is Trump a con, in every sense of the word. He was also national finance chair for Mitt Romney's 2008 presidential campaign and a state delegate for Jeb Bush's 2016 presidential bid. Haggerty came up in the Republican establishment that Trump has long railed against. But on the other hand, then at the end, when I won, he decided to take a job and get paid and then knuckle under. So that's a good pro. This is amazing. There's more cons. Trump is weighing debate skills for potential running mates, and Haggerty declined to share a stage with his rivals during his single political campaign in 2020. That, again, looks like a pro to me from the Trump perspective. Haggerty was an early backer of a proposed national abortion ban, a position that Trump has not supported publicly, but actually does. And if you're a Trump girlfriend or of somebody I know who needs an abortion because you're a slut and got pregnant, then that's okay too. Haggerty was an early backer of a proposed national abortion ban, a position Trump has not supported. Haggerty did not vote on June 5th for a bill to secure a right to contraception. Again, all the cons disguised as pros, or rather all the pros disguised as cons. I don't know what to tell you about this. Anyway, second tier, defined as still in the mix. Haggerty's in the first tier, believe it or not. These picks would be more of a surprise, but don't rule them out. First, Ben Carson. Okay, we know why. We know about him. Nikki Haley. That would be a surprise, because I think he's already said, she makes me puke. I can't stand her. She's disgusting. Oh, but she's my vice president. That could definitely happen in a Trump administration. Anyway, what about other people? Elise Stefanik, we know about her. And whatever. Maybe Sarah Huckabee Sanders. I think the picture tells the story here. I don't know what she's doing. She's working. Maybe she's at her retirement or something. She's at the podium speaking. Trump has got hands on her shoulders, thank you very much. But he's, looking away. I think that about describes his relationship with Sarah Huckabee Sanders. The picture with Elise Stefanik too. She's speaking and he's staring off into space. With Nikki Haley, he's doing the two-hand handshake. She's looking directly into his face. He's looking elsewhere, looking for the cameras. When you're talking about women candidates, it's important to take a look at where Trump's eyes are, because if it's not on their bodies, he's not interested. And then, the last of the second tier here is Byron Donalds, who used to be a more obscure figure, but has risen to some prominence in the Trump era, even when Trump is out. And I mean, is he little known enough that we need to do his pros and cons? Possibly. Second term congressman, that's a pretty quick rise. Made a name for himself in Washington as an avatar for the next generation of pro-Trump Republicans. Here's the pros. One of the party's relatively few black office holders, and would add racial diversity to the ticket at a time when Republicans are seeking to draw black voters away from Democrats. That's a real thing. Trump has taken notice of Donalds and has spoken admiringly of him to advisors. The hidden pro here is I won't forget his last name anyway. I'll forget his first name, but probably not his last name. The cons, he is a relatively inexperienced person, as a politician rather, but maybe an inexperienced person as well. I don't know. Relatively inexperienced as a politician. He ran unsuccessfully for House Speaker against Kevin McCarthy, who had Trump's endorsement, but Trump can sweep that under the rug pretty easily too, especially if there's any cash on the table. Donald's had his run-ins with law enforcement 2 decades ago, but then again, so is Trump. Trump is a convicted felon. Let's not forget that. Including a bribery charge to which he pleaded no contest. But if it was a federal bribery charge, we can just pardon that now. And he has said that he learned from the experience, describing what he did as the actions of a young kid. So always good if you're looking to get on the Trump ticket to already have been convicted of bribery. No surprises here. We knew he was a bribe taker when we brought him on, but that's okay. We're going to pardon him for it this time. So that's your New York Times profile of the leading contenders, and it's still in the mix for vice president, which is rather astonishing in a number of ways. Not the least of which is that, as I mentioned, that had been observed by Mitchell Epner on Blue Sky, who notes, for the record, as Greg did the other day, that the New York Times has published a supposedly complete analysis of pros and cons. I mean, one of them was he has dark hair, but okay, that's pretty complete, I guess. That's one way of looking at it. That's pretty complete. You included even that one. But supposedly complete analysis of the pros and cons of contenders to be former President Trump's VP nominee. But failed to mention that, a small consideration, the 12th Amendment to the Constitution would actually bar Florida's electoral votes from counting for Trump if he ran with Rubio or Donalds. Don't forget that the Constitution actually requires that the Electoral College cast votes for citizens of diverse states. And well, I guess we'll read up on the actual requirements as I turn around to go grab the old Constitution, which is sitting nearby and falling apart, but metaphorically as well as physically falling apart here, just so that we know the rules. But this came up the other day. Greg mentioned it, and this is, they speculate in the comments to the thread afterwards, exactly as Greg did. What will we do with something like that? Well, first of all, here's the rule. 12th Amendment is a lengthy one, but what's the part there? This is describing the electoral college process. And here we are. The electors shall meet in their respective states, we understand that part, and vote by ballot, we understand that, for president and vice president, one of whom, at least, shall not be an inhabitant of the same state with themselves. Okay, and they shall name in their ballots a person voted for a president, and in distinct ballots the person voted for as vice president, and they shall make distinct lists of all persons voted for. Okay, so all of this stuff, but first and foremost, if you are an elector, you've got to vote for at least one person. You got to vote for two people, one for president, one for vice president, and at least one of them has to be a resident of another state besides you. Well, if you live in Florida and you're an elector in Florida and you're going to cast your vote for president for Donald Trump, he lives in Florida. Okay, that's fine, because I can still save myself with vice president. And then you turn and you see, oh my gosh, the vice presidential candidate is Marco Rubio or Byron Donalds. They both represent Florida in Congress. We have to be fairly certain from another part of the Constitution that those guys are residents of Florida. So is Trump, and so am I. What am I going to do? So what that could mean in a country with laws and, a Supreme Court that interprets them, neutrally and correctly, they would, I guess, have to say, all right, when it comes time to count the electoral votes from Florida don't meet the requirements of the 12th Amendment. So what are we going to do about that? And after that, I guess the question is wide open, because no one has ever bothered to try to do this. Even when in 2000, when, amazingly enough, just like, what's his name? Who got himself named ambassador to Japan by working in the transition. We mentioned that he Dick Cheney'd his way into the federal government. Dick Cheney, of course, led the VP search for George W. Bush in 2000, and after an exhaustive search, landed on himself and had himself appointed to the job, or rather nominated to the job. And then they realized, oh yeah, right, that, what's that one? The Constitution? Yeah, that's the thing. It says you have to be residents of two different states. In other words, the electors from Texas, when Republicans win Texas, they're going to have to cast their votes for George Bush of Texas, same state as them. And of course, Dick Cheney, who lives where? Now, you might say Wyoming, right? But after all, he was at one point the congressman for Wyoming. That is true. But he left that job. And then he went to work where? Halliburton, right? And where are they? He had to move. They asked him to please move. We don't have remote employment capacity from Wyoming for someone like you. We need you down here in Texas. He was a resident of Texas. And he realized, I would really like to be vice president of the United States. I'm in a position to make myself vice president of the United States. I will pretend I still live in Wyoming for electoral college purposes. I will, in fact, move, I don't know, do I have pets? Move them back there. That will be my residence. But at least he sort of always maintained that he had a residence in Wyoming, and he had previously had a relatively strong relationship with them, had them having elected him statewide. Now, he is not originally from Wyoming, as my understanding, and that he was essentially like, where could I get elected? Where are there like 5 people and they're all Republicans? Wyoming? Boom. Let's move to Wyoming. What is his biography? I'll have to double check on that. But at any rate, the point is he had an existing relationship with the state, as artificial as it may have been. But born in Lincoln, Nebraska. Let's see. He then the family moved to Casper, Wyoming when he was in high school. So he was brought there possibly against his will, but at least he actually spent some time there, not carpetbagging for office, but his parents moved there. I'm thinking also, it makes me wonder whether he did the same thing. I guess he didn't. So that's, I guess, good. I don't know. But like, for instance, Newt Gingrich from Pennsylvania, and he basically said, where can I go where I would have a great chance of being elected as a Republican? And, that's, I guess, how he landed on Georgia. So, I mean, that's actually part of his biography, as I recall. Anyway, the point is, when push came to shove and they needed to be in compliance with the 12th Amendment, even they decided, all right, fine. I'll just say I'm a resident of Wyoming, and that'll clear up the problem. As Greg was saying the other day, don't put it past Trump to just run with, let's say, Rubio anyway, or rather to say, little Marco, I'm considering you for vice president, but you know what that means. I read about this thing, a constitution, and it says we have to be from different states in order for this to work. So if you want to be my vice president, you're going to have to be from a different state. I'm not moving. And Marco Rubio is the senator from Florida, and he's so thirsty for this power that he's not going to get from Trump, but thinks he might inherit at some point. Would it be possible that he would debase himself so much to say, yes, I'm the senator from the state of Florida, but today I'm not from Florida anymore. When I'm up in Washington, D.C. serving as senator, I have an apartment I keep in Maryland. I'm a resident of Maryland from now on, so that I can be Trump's vice president. Would he do it? He very well might. Would Byron Donalds do the same thing? He very well might. Would it be necessary, though, if Trump were to actually win election? Then no, probably not. If he were to seize power, then doubly so. Likely not. You're thinking of that country where people apply the law. Would it be possible? There's a million opportunities to get around it, right? Could 5 justices of the Supreme Court say, nah, they said it, but they didn't mean it. It's a 12th Amendment. That's not real founders. That comes later. By the way, what's the date of the 12th Amendment? 1804. So, it's the same guys. But it's not original. They didn't mean it. I don't know. We decided they didn't mean it in Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. How easy would it be for us to say, they didn't really mean it in the 12th Amendment? And what would they do if we said, it doesn't make any sense, but we say it anyway? Nothing. But they don't want to wait that long to find out that they can or can't have a vice president. But others speculating in the thread, what do you do about something like that? Mitchell says, by the way, the only proposed solution that I've seen would be for one of them, Rubio or Trump, or Donald's or Trump, depending on which one he picks, one of them to change their residency out of Florida. It has been reported that Rubio would consider leaving Florida and declaring himself to be a Maryland resident. That would be quite a move for Florida's senior senator, but of course he would be moving into the vice presidency, so what the F do I care? F Florida! Woo! That's his dedication to the state. Others commenting essentially the same and saying, I foresee the orange man waiting for the thirsty man to change his residency and then pointedly choosing a different reek for VP. People chiming in and saying, I love that name for them, reek. Yeah, that would describe the situation. And you would absolutely do that to Rubio. If you want to be on the ticket, you're going to have to change your residency. Okay, I'm a resident of Maryland. All right, who cares? Too late, I picked another one. And, I don't know what. The fallout then is, well, he's still senator from Florida until somebody finds a way to disqualify him or vote him out of office. And if that happens, that happens. All right, well, let's see. Then there's also people are then trying to figure out, actually game it out. Like, what happens if you just don't do anything? So all the electoral votes arrive there, and then somebody, I guess, says the Florida electoral votes can't count because they're not in compliance with the 12th Amendment. They're just not. What do we do about that? Now, of course, you could bring that up. Now it's, of course, harder to object to the validity of the Electoral College votes thanks to the Electoral Count Reform Act. But you would presumably, it would be a legitimate basis to find whatever the minimum number of signatures is from among the House and Senate. There would be Democrats who say, this is just a facial violation of the 12th Amendment. I have no problem signing on to this objection. So what happens? Well, you lodge your objection and then they suspend the count and the resolve into the two houses, and the Senate and House both separately vote on what to do about this. Currently, there's a Republican majority in the House. It is their hope, Republicans hope, that they take over a majority in the Senate. Whether they do or they don't, changes the outcome, I guess, a little bit. Like if a Republican House retires to consider the question, they're going to say, we find that it's fine, that it's not in violation of the 12th Amendment. I don't know what the logic will be, but it does not matter. If Republicans win control of the Senate, they'll do the same thing. If they don't win control of the Senate, they will do the opposite. And they will say, no, it is a facial violation of the 12th Amendment. The two houses then come back together and say, well, this is what the House said. The House said it's okay. The Senate says it's not okay. So I don't know exactly what happens. At minimum, they could then say, well, all right, Florida's electoral votes won't count. We can't get agreement on whether or not to accept them. Could they say somehow the parliamentarian tells me that the House says no, but the Senate says yes, so the answer is yes? They could. The presiding officer probably unlikely to say that. That, of course, would be Kamala Harris as president of the Senate. So in all likelihood, they come back and they say, well, it's a no. And what may end up happening is then they don't count Florida's electoral votes, which may or may not make a difference if Biden has won a 270 plus anyway without Florida. It's very unlikely that Trump would be able to put together 270 without Florida's votes. Biden was probably not going to get them anyway. And if he does get them, then that's fine because there's diversity on the ticket for the Democrats, so it's no problem. It's only if Trump expects to be winning that it becomes a problem. And if everybody expects that Trump is going to be the president more or less legitimately regardless, then they'll just steamroller straight past this. Or they could if they want to do things this way. Well, the presidency, Donald Trump is elected to the presidency. There's no problem there. Marco Rubio, however, is not elected to the vice presidency because there's not enough electoral votes to elect him because Florida's don't count. And so, therefore, there's a vacancy in the vice presidency, and we'll follow the constitutional prescription for what that means. And that means letting, I think the constitutional instruction there is that the vice presidency is filled by the Senate in their voting. And I think, do they vote by state? I'm not really sure. But maybe because of the way they are structured, they just vote straight up. Now, that would be interesting, too. You'd hand them a Democratic vice president, possibly. Or they could just keep the office vacant. I don't think there's any real requirement that there be a vice president. And a Republican Senate might opt for that. I don't know. Democratic Senate might certainly opt for it. But then that would just mean that if the House stays in Republican hands and Mike Johnson continues to remain Speaker of the House, that puts him in line for the vice presidency. Anyway, of course, I mean, by the way, the outcome could equally be, they could just engineer it this way. All right, here's our decision. If they really want Rubio as vice president for some reason, there's a real problem with Florida's electoral votes. And the electoral votes certainly can't count both towards Trump's election and Rubio's election. So we're going to elect Rubio as vice president and say there's a vacancy for the presidency, whereafter the rules of the Constitution say the House will elect the president, voting as state delegations. And of course, it's always been speculated that Republicans, anytime this speculation has come up, they've counted and said Republicans control the requisite number of state delegations such that the Republican would be elected anyway, and then you would just place Donald Trump in the presidency that way. That's a little riskier. Of course, Trump would never accept the idea of there being any doubt about his ascendancy to the presidency. If you want to do anything, screw Rubio. So I imagine they would go in that direction. But you could engineer it if you felt like you had the votes to, or if you felt, you could also just say, oh, by the way, this Constitution is suspended. F all of you. Just beginning right now. After all, day one is going to be, the nightmare begins. But that day one is supposed to not come until January 20th. So how do you handle January 6th? All right. So it would be a huge mess. It's not worth at this point, I don't know. Well, it's worth it on this show to speculate on these things. What could you actually do in a situation like that? Okay, we'll explore that. Would it ever come to that? Probably not. If we're in a position to be thinking about, all right, we have to start making the transition to a Trump presidency, there's no point in gaming out the rules. That was the point of the first half of the show. The rules don't apply, and they'll just do whatever the hell they want. That's that. There would be objections in Congress, but screw them. That's not even a branch anymore starting on January 20th. So go ahead and install them both. Or, could be a simple ploy to, well, sorry, Marco, you're just going to have to leave. We'll just choose somebody else and we'll have the Senate take care of that. Anyway, more to the point, I think, was that Mitchell was pointing out. This was the New York Times. Nobody thought to put in, here's what they put in for pros for somebody. He's got dark hair. His family is the minority owner of a soccer team in Nashville. That made the list. Nowhere in the cons, I don't know, maybe I should go back. I guess Mitchell, take Mitchell's word for it. Nowhere in the cons, we read Byron Donald's cons. We didn't read Marco Rubio's. None of the cons are prohibited from serving as vice president by the 12th Amendment to the Constitution. That's a con. That's a bigger con than has hair is a pro. You can't tell me they didn't have room to put that in the box there. Okay, they weren't doing Donald Trump, but like if you did the pros and cons of Donald Trump being president, wouldn't you put in a con, has been convicted of 34 felony counts in New York? Well, maybe some of them were misdemeanor counts, but criminal convict, that doesn't make the list, right? Well, neither does Constitution of the United States. So, we're doing great, everybody. The papers of record have got it all covered. Anyway, so where were we? Yes, right. Coming up on our third break, so we're not going to go too far afield here. Maybe we want to take a few minutes on the other side to discuss Something else that's occupied a lot of time on social media, Louisiana's radical new law requiring the 10 Commandments be installed, a poster of the 10 Commandments, not stone tablets, in every classroom in Louisiana. Why is that problematic? You probably have already guessed as to why that's problematic, but you may also have seen the commentary explaining why this one is particularly problematic. Nothing's ever simple. Everything's got nuance. Okay, the 10 Commandments are going on into each classroom. Well, which 10 Commandments? What do you mean? Which 10 Commandments? The 10 Commandments. Okay, well, as it turns out, the Bible has been written in a number of languages. There's the original, the various early translations, and then, of course, the several English translations. Which version? Are we going to have thou shalt not kill or you will not kill? Which one should we put in? But it gets more complicated than that. Stay tuned. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. By way of keeping up with current news, we should let you know that there are some decisions being released from the Supreme Court today, although it's, today is supposed to be, I think, the last day that they're releasing decisions, and there's like no indication that they have a decision ready for the Trump immunity case. They might just, not issue it. Remember that they were being accused of dragging their feet in order to make sure that the trial couldn't take place before the election, by waiting until the last possible minute to release their decision, which everybody understood to be today, I guess, Friday, June 21st, and they break for the summer. And, I don't know whether we said it aloud at the time. We probably just, blurted it out at some point along the way, though. But what if F you and they just don't do it? I'm sure that had to be in the considerations. Like, okay, well, the last day we're going to release decisions is June 21st, at least normally. That's on our schedule. Well, I think what we probably noted was they may have said at some point, well, on occasion, the Supreme Court has said, well, if necessary, we'll release one later. If we need more time, then they'll just take more time. But if they don't need more time, but they just want to take longer, then they'll just take longer. They can do that. And guess what? It looks like, I guess, that they will. Although I did see the idea floated, honestly, if the session closes here and you haven't issued a decision in what should be the easiest case in the world, does the president have absolute immunity always, even from before he was president, and then certainly forever after once he's been president? Is that a real thing? No, it isn't. If you won't issue a decision in that, you know what? The trial judges should just say, this is clearly not very important to the Supreme Court. They could have given us direction on this, and they didn't. We're just going to assume that in accordance with everything we've always understood about the law and its nature, that there is no such thing as absolute presidential immunity forever, and we're going to go ahead. And we're going to hold the trial. We may or may not finish before Election Day, but we're going to go. And if the Supreme Court wants to say something about it, let them say something about it. They gave them every opportunity to say it. They wouldn't say anything. At the minimum, we're going to draw them out with an emergency order past their last date of session. We're going to make them work after the session, even if it's just to say, no. We're holding this case. You can't proceed until we rule. Let them just put it out on the table. Anyway, they've released some decisions in other cases. The Rahimi case, the gun case that everybody had an eye on, the word is that the Supreme Court has 8-1 upheld restrictions on domestic abusers possessing firearms. And it's interesting in that the lone dissenter here is, of course, Clarence Thomas, who, basically, it says here, Roberts writes for the court in the Rahimi case, framing the decision as consistent with Bruen. Thomas, the author of Bruen, is the sole dissent here. So does that make any sense? Nope. But there you have it. Well, it's 8-1, and don't worry about it. It's totally consistent with our previous gun decisions, except that the guy who wrote the previous gun decision will not join the other 8 here for some strange reason. Obviously, it's not consistent with Bruen, as imagined by the guy who wrote the Bruen decision. But F you, look away. It's summertime. Goodbye. It doesn't make any sense. Does it have to make any sense? No, it doesn't. Will they have to make sense in a Trump administration upholding it's okay to be both guys from Florida? It won't have to. Might it? Might they make an attempt at it? I don't know. I don't really know. Can't tell you anymore. Should you go to law school now? No. You should not. Anyway, back to the story that we were doing before. There's a lot of good commentary, by the way, about this internal inconsistency. Just to let you know, in case you're watching, is a Pope hat, Ken White on social media discussing it now, putting it this way. Roberts, it's the imagined internal dialogue, saying, wait, Bruen says what? F. I got to stop voting on that S when I'm drunk. Okay, you can do this, Johnny. You went to Harvard. Let's parse our way out of this mess. Effing Thomas. I should have known better. And then the clip of the ruling. I guess, should we take a minute just to read through? Well, probably won't even make that much sense to us unless we're all constitutional scholars here. But basically, that's what the commentators on social media have to say about this. This makes zero sense. Zero. But we have to have a written product. I mean, eventually they'll say, F it. Too embarrassing. No written product. But for now, they say, all right. So you write things like, well, I don't know. Does the clip make any sense? Let's see. Nevertheless, some courts have misunderstood the methodology of our recent Second Amendment cases. You're all wrong. No, it's the children who are wrong. That clip. These precedents were not meant to suggest a law trapped in amber. As we explained in Heller, for example, the reach of the Second Amendment is not limited only to those arms that were in existence at the founding. Isn't that interesting? There's your originalism for you. No. It extends to everything because, it's a living document. Anyway, look, it doesn't make any sense. It won't make any sense. I'm not going to even read you the whole clip. We'll probably be discussing that next week. Anyway, you should know for now that this is happening. Decisions are being released. And now, back to what were we reading? Yes. No, I don't remember now that I think about it. Why are we, I can't find my way back to what we were doing. Oh, yes, what we were going to do. Right. Okay. I hadn't opened it yet. The Louisiana 10 Commandments decision. This is kind of fascinating. Not just because the courts will have to decide on F it. Yes, establishing a state religion is fine. We're good with it. But it's a facial prohibition in the Constitution. Yeah, well, whatever, man. But we haven't gotten to that stage. The Supreme Court, of course, has ruled on this in the past. And I'll read you Steve Bannon's piece from MSNBC. Why Louisiana's radical new law on the 10 Commandments in schools matters. Well, because it's important. God damn it. The Supreme Court has said that the 10 Commandments displays that have been proposed in the past in public schools are unconstitutional. So now they have to find a way to say that they're constitutional, which they can do. Louisiana Republicans passed a new law on this anyway because they're looking for the Supreme Court to take this up and say, meh, it's constitutional. I don't remember why we said it was unconstitutional. Anyway, it was some other people, and some of them are dead, and it's constitutional now. In recent months, a handful of Republican-dominated states have flirted with the idea of government-sponsored religious displays in public school classrooms, though the efforts ultimately fell short. As NBC News reported, however, GOP officials in Louisiana actually followed through on the idea. And a quote from the NBC report, Louisiana has become the first state to require that the Ten Commandments be displayed in every public classroom under a bill Republican Governor Jeff Landry signed into law on Wednesday. The GOP drafted legislation mandates that a poster-sized display of the Ten Commandments. I have very small posters in my house, so to me, that means, okay. In a large, easily readable font. Well. Should be in all public classrooms, from kindergarten to state-funded universities. Now, I am an originalist and a textualist, and I think that they should be written in ancient Hebrew, but apparently we're going to do this in large, easily readable English font. Anyway, under a new state law, which will take effect in 2025, because God said it was okay to wait. I'm not really sure why that is. Ten Commandments. Thou shalt wait until next year to read this list. That was number one, as everyone remembers. By the way, also assorted other documents, including the Mayflower Compact, which everybody forgot about, I'm sure, and the Declaration of Independence, can be displayed in classrooms, but only the Decalogue, the Ten Commandments, is required. So, there will be some expense involved with displaying the Ten Commandments in every classroom in every elementary school, middle school, high school, and public university in the state of Louisiana, by the way. But the new law requires that they be financed through private donations. Does that make sense? No. Will it work? I don't know. Who cares? It doesn't make a difference. They never really. It's not about putting up the posters. It's about getting to the Supreme Court so that they can find 5 people to say, it's not unconstitutional anymore. You are pre-wrong for listening to us the first time. It wasn't long before Americans United for Separation of Church and State, the American Civil Liberties Union, and the American Civil Liberties Union of Louisiana, federal and state, and the Freedom From Religion Foundation announced their intention to challenge the new law in court, which is exactly what they wanted. The law violates the separation of church and state. It does. And is blatantly unconstitutional. It is. The groups said in a joint statement, the First Amendment promises we all get to decide for ourselves what religious beliefs, if any, to hold and practice without pressure from the government. Politicians have no business imposing their preferred religious doctrine on students and families in public schools. At first blush, it's easy to imagine this lawsuit succeeding. After all, Louisiana's new Ten Commandments law is a legal, political, and theological mess. For example, and this is where it begins to become complicated. Why are you against putting the Ten Commandments in there? Well, you could say, well, I'm not. I'm just questioning, which translation are we going to... Well, just say it's unconstitutional for various other reasons. But okay. But here's a nuance for you. For example, Protestants, Jews, and Catholics each honor the commandments. Exactly. So why are we fighting about this? Well, they each honor the commandments, but each different faith, the different faith traditions number and word the Decalogue in different ways. So it'll be very easy to identify which religion they're establishing, right? If you number them differently, but you put the Protestant numbering system on the posters and put them in all of the classrooms, Catholics, Jews, people of all stripes could say, well, but that's not the one I recognize. Yeah, well, tough. Protestantism is the new state religion. Well, but in Louisiana, they might prefer the Catholic version of it. I don't really know. We'll see. But that'll be fight number one, I guess. But remember, all of the posters are going to be privately funded. So I guess it's which religion can raise the most money and put the most posters up. Or maybe there's some of each kind. And whoever, the Jews will take a third and the Protestants will take a third. I have no idea what the plan is. It's not the job of politicians, Steve Bannon continues, in state government to choose which version deserves an official endorsement or be imposed on public school children. The commandment law in Louisiana, for the record, appears to go with the Protestant version, despite the state's sizable Roman Catholic population. But, F you trying to be logical. The legal dimension to this is every bit as jarring. Louisiana's far-right Republican governor, Jeff Landry, declared yesterday, if you want to respect the rule of law, you got to start from the original lawgiver, which was, anyone? Moses. Okay. Moses probably would have told you, it's God. I didn't write these. God did. But actually, if Louisiana Republicans want to respect the rule of law, and they don't, but if you are to imagine that they did, they have to start with their own country's constitution, which includes the First Amendment, and to honor the U.S. Supreme Court's precedent, which GOP officials in the state have decided to ignore. So, duh. Again, if you had any illusions that you were dealing with normal, rational people, forget it. Indeed, when officials in Kentucky approved a nearly identical law nearly a half century ago, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in 1980 that 10 Commandments displays in public schools were unconstitutional. The Decalogue, the justices ruled in Stone versus Graham, and that was the name of the people, not the stone tablets, by the way. Although, maybe they meant Graham, and that's something. Well, we're going to put it in all the kindergarten classrooms, but inscribed on graham crackers. So at snack time every day, you'll physically consume the 10 Commandments. But it was, all right, Stone versus Graham, they said it is undeniably a sacred text in the Jewish and Christian faiths, and displaying them serves no educational function. So, why would Louisiana Republicans take a step that the Supreme Court has already rejected? It's probably because they're confident that the newly politicized High Court and its dominant far-right majority, not to mention the brazen Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is the circuit court that Louisiana sits in, will simply overturn the Stone precedent, doing fresh harm to the wall that's supposed to separate church and state in this country. I can't wait to be sued, Landry said, as if he were Foghorn Leghorn, at a fundraiser over the weekend. Those are the words of a partisan who expects his ideological judicial allies to let him trample over Louisianans' religious rights. Now, not mentioned in this, but mentioned in some of the commentary, and I'll have to find you some links on this. What's really interesting is not only is it the Protestant version of the 10 Commandments, and I'm not sufficiently versed in the differences either in numeration or areas that they emphasize in one translation over another, but I understand that the depiction, like the visual depiction of the 10 Commandments and the wording that they chose, is not something that's like theologically founded in any one denomination of Protestantism in particular, but rather that it's essentially the version of the 10 Commandments from the movie The 10 Commandments. So everybody's familiar with that because it's on television every year. That basically what this is doing is a lot like the explosion in mass-produced Civil War monuments with the Silent Sam figure on top, that particular casting of what's supposed to be, I guess, a depiction of a Confederate soldier that got mass-produced cheaply so that everybody could afford to put one up in their towns in front of the courthouse and intimidate the local blacks by doing so, and that those were like mass-produced and put up more or less in the even as late as the 1950s, and everybody saying my heritage, this statue's been here forever. It really hasn't. It's been here as long as doo-wop music. That's about it. But as far as I can remember, so that's forever as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, same thing with the 10 Commandments, that apparently there's a fraternal order of eagles, like a lodge, Eagles Lodge, that made it their purpose in life somehow to raise funds for and procure these tablets, either as stone tablets to put out in front of courtrooms or make the posters that school classrooms would display. And they distributed them. And they just basically were like, oh yeah, 10 Commandments, from the Bible. Yeah. Well, which translation? We're not going to do it in Hebrew. Nobody will be able to read it. No, we'll just use the 10 Commandments from the movie. Apparently, there was like a co-branding promotional thing when the movie came out to try and boost, ticket sales for the movie. They promoted it with 10 Commandments things. And these are the 10 Commandments that the Fraternal Order of Eagles wanted put every place. And this is the version of it that's been adopted for the Louisiana thing. So it was, how American can you get? Not only are we going to destroy the wall between church and state, but we're going to do it as a co-branded movie promotional thing. It's like, from now on, every classroom has to have one of those dune sandworm buckets of popcorn in it. It's just as much a religious symbol as the ones we've stolen from the 10 Commandments movie. It's just amazing that could even be part of what's going on here in an already ridiculous story. Okay, let's see. We have a couple of minutes left. There are a few other things that I wanted to get to, including a new report from Rosalind McGregor on more goings on in Ottawa County. Though I guess a good clarification we are overdue in making. She is not from Ottawa County. She lives elsewhere in Michigan. She's just fascinated by how ridiculous Ottawa County actually is. And this is another example of Ottawa County weirdness. Let's see if we can't get it on the record here.
Good morning, David.
Good morning, Rosalind.
Today I want to bring you up to speed on what shenanigans are still going on in Ottawa County. From Sarah Leach at the Michigan Advance. Democrat Chris Kleingens made headlines last month after winning by 20% a special recall election to become Ottawa County's newest commissioner on the GOP-dominated board. Now he's fighting for his job, and it's not the one on the county board. 2 weeks after Kleingens defeated Ottawa Impact Republican incumbent Lucy Ebel to represent the 2nd District, he was informed by the MSU Extension Office leadership that his new role as a commissioner was, quote, incompatible, unquote, with his employment as a community nutrition instructor. An attorney for Kleingens, however, said MSU Extension leadership forced him out, bowing to political pressure from Ottawa Impact, which threatened to not renew the Extension's contract with the county this coming December if Kleingens was allowed to continue to work there. MSU Extension District 7 Director Scott Korpak wrote in a May 23rd email, quote, the university's legal counsel and administrative human resources determined that holding both positions simultaneously is incompatible. If Mr. Kleingens is reelected in the November 2024 election, it is the university's understanding that he will resign. If not, the university would move to terminate his employment with MSU Extension, unquote. Kleingens' attorney, Sarah Riley Howard, said the university is in the wrong and threatened legal action if his job isn't restored. Quote, respectfully, we disagree with terminating Mr. Kleingens' job because he won his election to take office as an Ottawa County Commissioner. It is evident that MSU Extension has unfortunately and illegally bowed to pressure from the Ottawa Impact-controlled Commission majority, Howard wrote to Jessica Nakfor, Director of Human Resources for MSU Extension. Working as a nutrition editor through MSU Extension's Health and Nutrition Institute, Kleingens focused on food education and cooking demonstrations for people with special needs and on the poverty threshold. He explained that his position is funded through the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, which then funnels down to Michigan's Department of Health and Human Services and then to the Extension. As part of his expertise and interest, he served on the board of Ottawa Food. Back in September 2023, the Ottawa Impact slate cut $4 million from the fiscal year 2024 County Health Department's budget. This stirred up lots of anxiety in the community. Of particular concern was the impact on Ottawa Food, the county's food program for seniors and poor residents. Ottawa Food's advisory board looked at the funding situation and on November 14th announced it was suspending operations. When Kleingens announced that he would be running in the special recall election, he also resigned from the Ottawa Food Advisory Board. The Michigan Advance article contains parts of several audio recordings of meetings Kleingens had with MSU Extension leadership from November to the end of May. They make for an interesting read, but are too long to include here. Back to the Michigan Advance. Riley Howard, Kleingens' attorney, said the university is on the wrong side of the law and that Extension leadership is attempting to placate Board Chair Joe Moss and the Ottawa Impact Controlled Board as the Extension looks ahead to get a contract renewal for the fiscal year 2025 this fall. Quote, under Section 15181B, a person's elected office and public employment are incompatible only if there is the subordination of one public office to another, supervision by one office to the other, or a breach of duty of public office, Howard wrote to the Extension's Human Resources Director in a letter dated June 13th. Howard also argued that several legal opinions from the State Attorney General's office found that dual roles were permissible in some instances, including Kleingens' situation. Quote, instead, we believe that the actual reason for this decision is that the MSU Extension has bowed to political pressure from current Ottawa County Commissioners aligned with Ottawa Impact and Lucy Ebel, Mr. Kleingens' opponent in the recall election, Riley Howard wrote in the letter. As I am sure you are now aware, Ms. Ebel also remains a candidate for the next full commission term in the August primary and the November general election, where she would face off against Chris again. In firing him because of Ottawa Impact's political pressure and somewhat obvious intent to harm Mr. Kleingens' ability to make a living, MSU Extension has violated Mr. Kleingens' First Amendment rights, unquote. Kleingens was formally sworn in as county commissioner on May 28th. At the next commissioner meeting on June 11th, the reception from the other commissioners wasn't exactly warm. When Commissioner Doug Zylstra, a fellow Democrat, asked to give the newcomer more subcommittee assignments to, quote, give him an opportunity to learn, unquote, Board Vice Chair and Ottawa Impact Vice President Sylvia Rodia responded, quote, I just want to point out that we don't owe Commissioner Kleingens anything, unquote. So, David, it seems that the county board chair, Joe Moss, is throwing his Ottawa Impact weight around and spending county residents' money fighting more lawsuits. Back to you.
Wow. So that's pretty outrageous. There's really no reason to think that it's incompatible to do what he did at the MSU Extension and serve on the county board. It sounds like actually a great idea. Of course, it would be in service of the county's poor and residents of special needs, and that's not what Ottawa Impact is interested in. So, yeah, just trying to essentially force him out of the service in the role that he was elected to. And I love the comment by the other board member. We don't need to educate him in how to do a good job here. We want him to do a bad job so that he's not reelected later on. So, no more subcommittee assignments for him. Okay, very interesting. All right. Well, there's some other legal happenings that we should bring to your attention prior to the weekend. Just in terms of letting you know, one of the more idiotic sounding and outrageous legal maneuvers that's happening out there. Just again, there's no final answer that Republicans will accept to anything. Axios reports that the Missouri Attorney General is going to sue the state of New York. Why? Over the Trump hush money case. Sophia Kai reports this for Axios. Get a load of this. Missouri's Attorney General announced on Thursday he is suing the state of New York for alleged election interference and wrongful prosecution over former President Trump's hush money case. It marks the beginning of what's expected to be the next wave of legal action after a New York jury found the presumptive Republican nominee guilty of 34 felony counts for falsifying business records, with red states suing on Trump's behalf. You might wonder, what's your standing here? But of course, they're claiming, it's election interference and we're going to participate in the election. His allies immediately urged Republican states attorneys general, to take action following the historic case that saw Trump become the first ever former U.S. president to be a convicted felon. Attorney General Andrew Bailey claims that the case was brought solely to smear presumptive presidential nominee Trump going into November's election. He argues that the statute of limitations on misdemeanor business records falsification expired in 2019, and that the New York DA never specified intent to commit another crime. Here's an additional comment from him. We have to fight back against a rogue prosecutor from another state, somehow, who is trying to take a presidential candidate off the campaign trail. The case is over. He's back on the campaign trail. That's it. To the extent that he wants to appeal it and take himself off the campaign trail, that's up to him. That's his business. But he says it sabotages Missourians' right to a free and fair election. And stay tuned for more. I'm going to say that in a minute, too, myself. Representatives for the Office of the New York Attorney General and Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg, one of the lead prosecutors on the Trump case, did not immediately respond to Axios' request for comment. But by the way, he offers some between-the-lines analysis here. She does. Bailey, the Missouri AG, will in August face a primary challenge from Will Scharf, who is himself a member of Trump's legal team. So, of course, Trump is likely to consider that guy the more loyal and might end up endorsing him. So, quick, we got to do this subservient lickspittle move to see if we can't either freeze him in place and not make an endorsement or allow us to capture the endorsement instead. That's pretty amazing. It's like there's just no law and order left in this country under a Trump administration should he somehow seize power. If you thought I was kidding, this was meant to bolster, this and Rosalind's story both actually should serve to bolster the idea that they're just going to throw it all in the garbage can. Schedule F, fire anybody who doesn't do things the way we want them done, use it as an excuse to raise bribe money just so long as you kick it up. I'll pardon you later. If you don't believe me, take a look at what this is happening here. The Missouri Attorney General suing the state of New York for having applied its own law to catch a criminal and convict him. Now Missouri gets to decide whether or not New York gets to actually enforce its own laws. I don't think so. In the meantime, something else happening as well. Chris Geidner noting for us, we mentioned yesterday, it's time for Steve Bannon to get ready to surrender for his prison sentence coming on July 1st. And that's like a weekend away from now, right? 10 days or so. And we said, well, he's got only a couple of moves left. Well, he's made one of those moves. Bannon's lawyers have gone to SCOTUS asking to stay out of prison pending his appeal. Do we think that they will jump in? And remember, it's summertime. They're supposed to be done. We have no time for issuing any more opinions. Can't help you. Sorry.
Networksradio.com.
Well, I don't know. Maybe they'll find time for this one.
Listening to Kagro in the morning with David Waldman.
All right, well, let's see. What do we got coming up after this? I don't know. It's weekend for me. I'm going back to sleep. Some more irregular programming, as Justin says. He's still settling in from his week-long trips. So stay tuned. Bear with us. There's some good programming to stand in between now and then. Next week, back to normal with the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. We'll see you then.